make that fun announcement now. I didn't think it used to do that. I think that's new. It is new, right? Yeah, Martha, you agreeing with me? Yeah, must be some lawsuit, lawyers. All right, so I just want to first say thank you everybody for coming. I'm really excited that there's like over 100 of you that decided to spend your Saturday evening with me talking about the February bar. Like, what a joy. Hopefully you have a glass of wine or something to like, or not, or just like coffee or water or whatever, maybe some herbal tea to calm yourselves. So I just want to say thanks for being here. I'm Maureen. I know I've, talked to a lot of you or seen you on Facebook or whatever. So thanks so much. I feel so cheesy doing this, but just so you all know, I'm going to start doing little short clips and like answering question and posting tips. I'm going to get Mary and Tina from the book that everybody has to also incorporate doing some tips and things on my Instagram account. So if you want to follow it, we'll be posting just free stuff there. And that's also a good way to learn about workshop. It's just on Instagram. It's BarMD Law. No spacing, no none of that, but BarMD Law. So I can post it in the chat too, just so you all have it. And I feel like such a nerd saying this because I joke about being an influencer. But it is going to be, it's just at BarMD Law for Instagram. So if you want to add it, we're going to, you can get more information and we're going to do some fun little, tips and tricks throughout the bar cycle. All right, cool. So that's that. My assistant will be so happy that I actually did that. All right, let's talk. So goals for today. Goals for today is I want you all to understand issues that are tested on the February 2021 Cal Bar. I'm going to talk about the variance between scores on the written portion. And I'm mostly talking about all of the essays in the PT today. I can answer some MBE questions if you want at the end. But this is really to cover the essays and the PT. And then I'm also going to talk about how to improve. At the end, we have like a couple new pretty inexpensive things that we just launched like today. So I can show you some of those, and I'm going to answer questions at the end too. So, but thanks for being here. And all right, let's dig into it. So first, these are really the big takeaways that I want you to remember. And like really what I've noticed with the essays. And then also, so you all understand really the difference between the various scores. It can be a bit mystifying for bar takers. So I thought that some of this info would be helpful. So first, for the February 2021 Cal Bar, the passing score on each written event, so the 5 essays and the PT, was about a 61. I think it was like 60.8, something like that. But it was a 61. That's significant because that's actually kind of a high score. I know that when the Cal Supreme Court announced the lowered cut score to 1390 from 1440, I know companies, I'm not going to name them, but they said, now a 60 is a passing score. That was true in that was true in October, but not true in February. In October, you needed a 58. This time you needed a 61. So for all of you that didn't see, if you took October and then you took February and you didn't see big change in your scaled scores, that may be in part due to the scaling. It was a tougher scale this time. So I want you to know that. So I've looked with, at essays, I've looked at score letters with lots of people. I've looked at score letters with lots and lots of people over the last couple of weeks. And that's one thing I noticed. People thought they didn't improve, but they actually did. So it's helpful to see if you want to understand your raw written score and did you improve or not? Or if you want to understand your scaled score, look at your raw written score from October to February to see if you actually made a jump. And that'll give you a little bit more accurate information in assessing what you did and whether you improved really. So what that means too is it's okay to get some 60s. You can even afford to get a 55 here and there, but you really need to shoot for 65s. You really need to shoot for 65s. So yeah. Also then understanding the difference between a 55, a 60, and a 65, really, because these are the really common scores. 55s and 60s are generally the most common scores. Every once in a while, the California bar examiners will actually release reports detailing all the score distributions, how many 50s, 55s, 60s, 65s, et ceteras that they gave out. And we noticed that the large majority, and this was when it was a 1440, but the large majority were 55s and 60s. There were 55s and 60s. So I want you to understand, the difference between these three scores. And in terms of preparing for the bar and for the essays and for the performance test, first you got to know, how do I get to a 60? Like, how do I get there? A lot of model answers that are out there, and like, I'm guilty of it too. We give you like perfect answers, right? That are not attainable, and particularly not attainable across the board, But what I like to teach you, what I like to show you is, how do you get, first, how do you get to a 55? And then how do you get to a 60? And then how do you push it to a 65? So you've got to go incrementally. So focus on that. And that's how you should measure your progress. Like, I think to make bar exam prep not fully demoralizing, it's good to shoot for like, okay, am I going from a 55 to a 60? Am I spotting more issues? It doesn't have to be perfect, but am I like ratcheting my score up? And that's so focus on that. A 55 generally will mean that you're missing some issues. You might miss like a big issue, or you might miss a couple of smaller issues. John, I just saw you pick up like an actual room phone, which I haven't seen. You should that's like a little bit of history right there. But on a 55, you're missing issues. So it might be a major issue, or you might be missing a couple of, a few smaller issues. And when I say issues, it's not like assault, battery, negligence. I mean, those are legal issues. They can also be missing counter arguments. So every fact is related to, like, every fact in the fact pattern equals an issue. And there's usually 8 to 12, so an average of 10, like, issue headings in an essay around there. Also with 55s, often your organization needs improvement. And when I say that your organization needs improvement, it's not just that you're not IRACing. It's not just that. It can be the way that you're paragraphing, not breaking up your rule from your analysis, from your conclusion. So it can be that. It can also be like, maybe you write a personal jurisdiction analysis, but it's just a heading for PJ and then massive blocks. So you're not splitting up the issues, which usually also means that you're not addressing all of the issues in PJ because you haven't broken it apart. So you really want to know what are all of the various components? And break it down. So organization means a few different things. A 60, usually you hit the issues the examiners are looking for. So your issue spotting is better. Usually that's the big difference between a 55 and a 60, is your issue spotting is a little bit better. And your organization is usually a bit better too. Like, I can see the issues, because bar graders spend like 2 minutes reading your essays and your PT. That's it. They don't spend a lot of time. So that being said, you have to make it easy for them to see the issues, which ties back into the organization. But a 60 is still not going to use every fact. They're not going to use every fact. You hit the big issues that the examiners were looking for, but there were probably smaller ones that you didn't hit, more complicated ones, issues that require you to make an assumption about a particular fact. So there's probably issues that you're missing, but you hit, you got the big ones. You got the big ones they were really looking for. For example, I'm sure if y'all have taken the Cal Bar, if you've studied for it, or if you are taking it for the first time, an essay that you will for sure look at while you're prepping this summer is the July 2010 Torts essays, where there's a homeowner that has a gun, leaves it on the nightstand, a burglar breaks in, steals the gun, goes on to carry out a whole host of things, or goes to cinema and is in the parking lot of the cinema, and cinema's had recent robberies there, and holds up a lady, but she sees the gun and she faints. He wants to steal her purse, so it's a robbery. So there's a question about, so there's tons and tons of issues there. There's 2 massive negligence analyses, and for the burglar, it's every single intentional tort, like all of them. So it's a classic one. So in that essay, you needed to hit the 2 negligence analyses, and you needed to hit a few intentional torts. So that's what I mean by hitting issues. You might not have hit every single one, but you hit, you got that there were intentional torts in that essay. So that's what we mean. So, one person could talk about the 2 assaults and the battery. Another person might say, an assault, a battery, and an IIED, etc. So it's just like some level of addressing intentional torts. So not the same across the board, but a lot of issues being addressed. But even in a 60, so if in that essay, the July 2010 torts essay, if you, only hit one of the intentional torts because you ran out of time, then that's probably going to still be at a 55. Even if you did killer negligence analyses on the other 2, if you just hit one intentional tort, you're not going to go above a 55. But if you hit a few, then you get over that hurdle. And now you're at a 60. But you might have been lacking depth of analysis. You might not have been raising and dismissing the salient counter arguments. And I say the salient counter arguments because you want to pick the good ones. Like, for example, in that one, there was a proximate cause issue that was ambiguous. So that's a 60. A 60 means that you hit some more issues, but it's not a 65 because you lack depth of analysis. So a 65 means you're using more facts. You have better counter arguments. So your analysis is deeper. You have at least 2 counter arguments. I always say that's my threshold is at least 2, and the 2 most salient counter arguments. And you're also well organized. You're writing in a really well organized manner. And I like what I kept seeing is I saw so many 55s and score letters, and it's just there's a mismanagement of time. There's a mismanagement of time, I think, associated with that. And not, it is a mismanagement, but not as a negative way. Like what happens usually when somebody runs out of time, and these were long fact patterns, several of them went on to 2 pages, which is not all that common. But it happened a couple times. So they were long. So that it's tough. But what happens is if you don't plan out your answer, you might spend all your time in a first or second issue when all the points are in issue 6. And if you didn't allocate your time properly and realize that all the points were in issue 6 or a lot of points, that's going to land you you're going to get a 55 because you didn't manage your time. So you want to think about that, allocate points, manage your time effectively. So we're going to talk about some of that today. All right. Any questions on that stuff so far? I'm going to assume not because I asked you to hold all your questions. But you can take a breather here. I'll have a sip of water. They do actually read a bar grader. Somebody asked if they read the analysis or is it all about the issues in the organization? They do read the analysis, 100%. But just so you all know too, a little bit about the bar grading process. Bar graders, first of all, they train for a while, several bar cycles before they're allowed to actually allocate grades. So they grade for a while. And every bar grader, it's if I'm a bar grader, I'm grading one essay. So I'm just grading the same one over and over. So your bar exam stuff gets looked at by a minimum of 6 different people. So they grade the same one. They also have written an answer to it and analyzed it, had numerous discussions and debates on what scores should, what should get what. So they do really know the essays and the PT very well. So you actually can grade them fairly quickly. Doesn't mean that they're always going to be accurate. Doesn't mean that people there's not some subjective bias in grading that comes into play, because it certainly does. And I've seen it sadly a lot. So, but they do know the essays really well, but they spend about 2 minutes reading them. So they're looking for the key things. They're looking for you hitting all the issues. And then once you do, then they look at your analysis. And if you organize well, your analysis jumps off the page, and then they can see that your analysis is good or bad, but they can see the good arguments that you made if you organize well. So you want to do it. You want to organize it really well.
I have one question, Maureen. When
Sure.
Over here, we say passing score on each event 61. So when we say 61, this is all the average of the 6 questions, including the PT, or there is something different in the PT? They have a different way of marking?
No, they don't. It's the same in the PT. So you needed to average that across all of them. And scores just go from 60 to 65, unless you get a second read, which you generally want to avoid, because then they get looked at closer, and usually they start picking flaws. But yeah, but the PT counts twice. So like getting a high score on the PT is critical.
Okay, because what I am looking at is my average score was 60.
Mm-hmm.
If I go with the 6 of my answers, so
So it,
um,
yeah.
because
So
like I had 270s, 255s, 150, and 160. So
yeah. So you got to balance it all out. And that's also why you have to like study every single subject. Not saying that you didn't, but that's also why. And I'm going to talk about that at the end. I'm going to talk about that a bit at the end.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Was that Jagmeet?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. They don't have a max of 2 minutes, but like facts should pop out. Like I've tested myself on this. Um, I don't do that though, Lavinia. Because I can like it's really a skim. And there's really skilled ways to skim. And like I've done this where I have law students, I teach at a law school and I'm in the midst of grading 140 essays, 125, which is super fun. That's what I'm doing after this. But those I can actually like, I always, now I go through my essays 3 times to look for stuff because I want to award points. Like I have a goal of doing that, but bar graders don't because they get paid by the essay that they grade. So, and like I care about my students. But I will usually go through my essays and I will jot down on the side an estimate, like what I think the bar score is. It rarely changes when I go and read it more in depth, rarely. So I do a quick 2-minute read and then I do an in-depth read and then I double check everything once I've read through all of them. So I double check to be like, okay, was I being too harsh at the beginning or whatever? And you do like it doesn't change very much. And I don't look at the original scores that I gave either. I just check them afterwards as like to try to make it sort of blind. So for what it's worth, I don't like to be so cynical about the test. So I think it can be done. But I do see stuff where I'm just like mad because I like totally disagree with the scores that bar graders gave. And I've seen plenty where there's like 2 graders and one gives a 70 and one gives a 55. And like, I just don't think that should happen. So it's frustrating. If the first read has the passing score, they don't read it a second time. That's correct, Julia. Was somebody going to say something?
Can you repeat that? What did you just say, Maureen? I'm sorry.
Oh, I have no idea. I just said a lot.
No, the last part about if they have a passing grade, if you have a passing
if
grade.
they have a passing, if on the first read, if you have a passing score, you just pass. So you never want to get to a second read because second reads, the scores generally dropped. Yeah. No, they didn't do this. They didn't stop the second reading. They stopped the third read. Yeah. Yeah, Starlight, yeah, it's different with it being remote. All right. Let's get into the actual essays. You all ready for that? Okay. Let me do a new share. This might take me a minute or two. If you want to stretch for a second, feel free to do that.
Are they going to make all the exams remote now for the future? I live in Boston and I'm 60 years old. I'm just wondering, like, they said that they might make the exams remote. Is it an option?
I don't think they're going to. I think they're going to go back to in person, but they may have a remote option. I don't know. I'm really curious about that too.
I called them and they says that they after COVID's over, they might keep the remote option indefinitely. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that, but it's certainly something I'm going to look into.
But you don't think so?
No, I don't think they'll make. I think they will have I think that they will have a remote option, or I think they will definitely go back to being in person, but they might also offer it remotely. So it might be both in the future.
Oh, no, that's my question. No, that's my question. I'm sorry to take your time, but they said they will have it in person, but they may indefinitely have a remote option. That's my question.
Yeah, I think that is likely. But I don't know for sure. But it's definitely something I'm looking at and I want to know the answer to.
Oh, good. Yeah, because I'm in Boston. It's just difficult to travel. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you.
Yeah. Okay.
Saves a lot of hotel costs and all that and travel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm 60 years old and I'm in a wheelchair. I'm older stuff, so it's old. Thanks.
Yeah, makes sense. Let me just find my second window that I want to open. So let's do this. All right, y'all. We're gonna go up to this, to the top. And then I have this handout that I prepared. Can you guys see it? There's a handout and the bar questions. Y'all can see both. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, cool, thank you.
Is that handout in the course materials or no?
It will be,
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it will be.
And the SARX, is that something that's also included in the regular courses, or is that an additional thing?
It's included in the full courses. Is this
Okay,
Matt?
got it. Ryan, with then
Ryan. Oh,
I'm in
Ryan.
the
Yeah,
full
yeah, yeah.
course. Yeah.
You are.
So
You are.
I was just curious if it was. I think I tried to sign in and it didn't work, but I'll figure it out later. I don't want to hold anything up.
Yeah, well, Manfred was testing some stuff, so it should be, because some people were saying that for most people that couldn't get it, you had to expand the screen, but Manfred was running some tests on that to make sure.
Sounds good. I don't want to sidetrack
of
anything.
course.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. All right, everybody take a minute, and I'm sharing it on the screen. If you pull the questions, they are posted on the CalBAR website. So if you want to, have a look there, feel free to have a look. But let me give you all 5 minutes to read it. To just read the fact pattern, and then we're going to talk about it.
One quick question too. Do you know when they post the answers on the California Bar website too?
They'll be posted in the next few weeks. So, but they said sometime in June.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, which is insane, but. And it does go on to the next page. Oh, thanks, Jennifer. Anybody need more time? Click the raise hand button if you need more time. I'm going to read it aloud too, so you'll get it there. But okay, let's go through it. Let's talk about it. So the first thing we always do, and I'm not actually, if you've attended my essay workshops, I'm not going to go these essays as in depth as I do in those, because otherwise we would be here until like 2 a.m. And I know we're having a good time, but like I need some sleep. I got up very early to get my blowout this morning. So I'm not going to go in them as depth, but we're going to talk about we're going to really talk about all the issues that were being tested, and the different use of the facts essentially. All right. So first we see that this is an evidence question because it asks what objections could Paul's attorney and Dell's attorney reasonably make to the questions or answers to Mark's testimony numbered 1 to 5 above, and how should the court rule on each objection discussed? So note there that it's Paul's attorney, Dell's attorney, reasonably make to the questions or answers. So it's to both. So you've got to pay attention to both. Often with the answers, it's going to be a motion to strike. But yeah, so there's that. And when I see evidence with the numbers like that, I'm like, oh, is this a transcript style, which they hadn't done in a while, but they finally did it again. And then what objections could Dell's attorney reasonably make to the motion to enter the insurance company's report into evidence, and how should the court rule? How should the court rule? So, and then it says answer according to California law. Answer according to California law. So we're in Cal evidence. One little thing. Cal evidence. So a lot of people are like, great, I'm not going to get Cal evidence this time. They have done Cal evidence back to back before. So don't like write it off. They've done Cal evidence back to back before, but I know a lot of people weren't super pleased when they saw this subject. They also love to throw people, like one thing with the bar, they love to throw people at the beginning of the test. They like to get you what's unexpected at the very beginning to like kind of throw you off your game a little bit and see how you recover. They did it to me in 2014 when I saw the first essay when they had just done remedies 3 times back to back. They had just done it 3 times back to back. They did it again to us a 4th time. Everybody was like, they're not going to be pure remedies. You're not going to get a pure remedies essay. Not going to test remedies. Essay number 1, it was remedies. And I was terrified of remedies because I was like, didn't take it in law school. Didn't really pay attention, honestly, because I like in lectures and things during bar prep, because I was like, oh, that's not going to get tested. So I did my work. I like wrote my 5 essays in the subject, but I was just like, ooh, like it terrified me. But essay number 1 was it. So don't write anything off. Study everything, which you all know, but I'm going to reiterate it again because they've done Cal evidence back to back. Okay, so answer according to California law. So because it's Cal evidence, we always start with Prop 8. So I know I'm going to start with Prop 8 and say, even though it's a civil case, I'm going to say this is Prop 8, but that applies to criminal cases. This is a civil case for personal injuries. So don't have to worry about Prop 8, not applicable. So 3 of the facts. On January 15th, Paul fell down the stairwell of Dell's department store, Dell. Paul sued Dell for personal injuries, alleging he fell because one of the steps was broken. If evidence essays, they always give you these background facts. They always give you these background facts so you can tie the evidence, like establish how it's relevant to the case at issue. So you always want to think, okay, well, what element is this going to prove? Often it's a negligence suit. It's really often a suit for negligence. And if they don't say that, but you see it's a personal injury, it's probably negligence. So tie it to the elements of negligence. The following occurred at a jury trial in the California Superior Court. In the California Superior Court while Dell's manager, Mark, was being examined by Dell's attorney. So question, where were you when Paul fell down the stairs? So 1, I see immediately, anytime it's a transcript style, you're going to look for a lot of form objections. Answer, I was standing nearby with my back to the stairs talking to Carol, a store customer, when I heard the noise of the fall. So I see there's a question and answer, but it's not actually like call 1. So I actually think next, like I'm looking at this again, I've looked at it 10 times. I'm like, oh, maybe I should have incorporated the question and answer at the top into my, also into my analysis, which I didn't, but that's okay. But at point 1, it says, has Paul sued Dell before? Answer, yes, 5 times that I personally know about. So I see that. And first, I always think relevance. So I would talk about logical, it goes to damages, and I think legal. So legal relevance, if it is unfairly prejudicial, confusion, misleading the jury, etc. Waste of time. a needless presentation of cumulative evidence, all of that stuff. Here, generally speaking, the one that you're looking for, though, under 403 is that it's unfairly prejudicial. And remember, all evidence is prejudicial. It's just, is it unfairly prejudicial, right? Or any, it should be prejudicial because you're trying to establish guilt or innocence or, liability or not liable. So this goes to damages, and then unfairly prejudicial because based on this 5 times that I personally know about, the presumption is, okay, if you sue a lot and this person sues this defendant a lot, you just assume that they're litigious, right? Or in California, they're a vexatious litigant, right? So you're just trying to, that's what it's there for. Could also be like, that's the assumption, right, that we jump to when we see that. However, it could also be the opposite, that Dell is just super negligent, but we think we blame the plaintiff. So it's going to make the jury prejudice against the plaintiff without really evaluating on the basis of the facts of the current case. So unfairly prejudicial. Also character evidence, which is really a special relevance issue, but I like to call it out just to call it a point to the bar graders and say, look, I know what's going on. Like this is a character issue. Generally inadmissible to prove conduct in conformity therewith. And evidence of other crimes, wrongs, or specific bad acts are inadmissible to prove action in conformity therewith. This is really offered, and especially if you look at who's offering it. If you look at who's offering it, which is Dell's attorney, they're offering it to show that Paul has sued Dell 5 times. So they're really offering it to show that he's just litigious and just has like a vendetta against Dell for some reason. Like, I don't know why. I think of the computers, and I'm like, maybe it's just a lot of bad computers, right? Well, maybe it wouldn't surprise me if you sued him 5 times, but anyway, I'm just kidding. But that is, so it's offered really to prove that Paul is just litigious. So it's both unfairly prejudicial and it's like improper character evidence. So it's inadmissible and the court should strike the answer. The court should strike the answer. So that's call 1. Call 2, question, no one saw the accident, right? Answer, that's right. A thorough investigation was unable to find anyone who saw Paul fall on the stairs. So first, form, it's leading, suggests the answer that no one saw the accident. Competence, personal knowledge. Mark doesn't personally know whether anybody witnessed the accident because how can he know that? Is he aware of like everybody that was around? So there's that, first of all, because he's saying no one saw it. So that's a little bit surprising because I don't know, there could be people, watching things that you don't know about. But also it tells us that Mark learned this information from a report. Mark learned this information. So he didn't learn it because he was there and watched the whole thing necessarily. He learned it from a report. So the report is actually needed. And this actually, most people that got high scores on this essay address personal knowledge, but this is actually a violation of the best evidence rule also. So like to get a 65, you needed the competence piece, but you should also raise to get a higher score, best evidence rule. It appears that Mark learned that nobody saw the accident from the investigative report. So to prove information contained within a report, you generally need you'll often need the report. So I would raise best evidence here, or the second, in California, the secondary evidence rule. Point 3. So Mark was then cross-examined by Paul's attorney as follows. So question, isn't it true that you used to be employed by Paul as a cashier in his grocery store and that he fired you for stealing money from the cash register? That's what he claimed. So relevance, this goes to credibility. Credibility is always at issue. It's impeachment. It goes to bias. So, why would he testify this way? And then it also goes to impeachment by a character for truthfulness. But the California Evidence Code prohibits inquiry into specific bad acts probative of truthfulness on cross in civil cases. So this is improper. And the court should strike the question and strike the answer. The answer is also non-responsive because it's also non-responsive because he's just saying that's what he claimed. So inadmissible and strike both. Call 4. The stairs were repaired the day after Paul fell, weren't they? Answer, yes. So this is a classic subsequent remedial measure. Relevance, I want to think of, okay, well, why is this relevant? Establish they were broken, goes to breach, causation. Generally with relevance, remember, we want to tie it to an element. So what is this going to prove? Always tie that. But there's a policy exclusion here. Policy exclusion for subsequent remedial measures. So because this is a subsequent remedial measure, the court should find it inadmissible. The court should find it inadmissible. There is something about it though. One thing to note here too is the fact in this is that the stairs were repaired the day after Paul fell. So there's a timing issue there, which is going to be helpful to us for the last piece. It's going to be helpful to us for the last piece. Okay, then point 5, didn't Carol, the store customer, exclaim at the time of the accident? They say exclaim, which all of you probably addressed. A, hearsay. B, excited utterance, or in California, spontaneous statement. Carol exclaimed at the time of the accident, and it was at the time, oh no, a man just fell on that broken step. So it's oh no, and a question, a man just fell on that broken step, which is weird to me that that's a question. I feel like they should both be exclamation points, but who knows? And the answer was, so what? So again, relevance. Now, one thing, there are 6 questions in this evidence fact pattern. That is a lot. That is a lot. If you're running out of time management, don't spend all your time on relevance throughout. Hit it where you really need to, and don't do it in the other places. Get to the unique issues. So that's somewhere where I see people spending a lot of time. In a perfect answer, you would address relevance each time because it's a threshold issue. However, on the bar, you want to like give them the new analysis. You want to give them the new analysis. So here, this is dealing with the hearsay issue. This is dealing with the hearsay issue. So you really want to spend that time on that. So hearsay, it's at the store, it's a statement. Well, so there's a question here though. Well, there is literally a question, but she says, oh no. And that's yelled, right? It's just, that would be a spontaneous statement. But then is the question here actually a statement? So you actually have to address both pieces of it. And I think a lot of people missed that on this essay, the 2 pieces and the ambiguity. Now, to get a high score, to get a 65, and even a 60, well, definitely a 60, but a 65, you even didn't have to do this to split them up. But going above that, a 70, so getting that real high score would address the statements separately and address the fact that maybe a man just fell on that broken step ? Is not a statement. However, it's a statement if it's assertive, if you're actually asserting something. And here she is really asserting that somebody fell on the broken and that the step was broken. So I think this does qualify as a hearsay statement, but I would split it up and address both. So spontaneous statement, exclamation point for the first half. And even though the second half is a question, it was made in conjunction with the first and was still probably made under the stress of the event because she exclaimed both at the time of the accident. So I want to deal with the ambiguity there of the fact that the second half is a question. Present sense impression, she's expressing what she saw when she saw it. So present sense impression, you could raise that too. Often, if you see excited utterance or spontaneous statement, also raise present sense impression. Those generally go hand in hand. That being said, though, excited utterance is really what they were getting at, or spontaneous statement. So if you didn't have a lot of time, if you had like 5 minutes left and you needed to get through call B, I would not raise that second hearsay issue. A really high scoring answer would reach both and would answer B, but just like address all of the questions, figure out whether it's admissible or not, and then you can raise this, a second hearsay exception. Then B, what objections could Dell's attorney reasonably make to the motion to enter the insurance company's report into evidence, and how should the court rule? How should the court rule? I got a question. Is it okay that you write our answer like this, not in paragraphs? No, this is just like my notes. I didn't write out like full model answers for this. This is just my notes on this. Mine would not look like this on the bar. I would write a rule. I'd have a rule paragraph under every single heading here, unless it was like just a subheading. Under every heading, I would have a rule, an analysis, and a conclusion, 3 paragraphs. I might have 4 paragraphs if there was a counter argument. So my actual answers would be a lot more in depth. This is just notes to make it a lot easier for you all to work through and make it easier for you all afterwards when you want to compare to your answers, that you hit the like main things. Because sometimes it's harder for people to actually pull out of my analysis what everything, like that you needed to use, like the critical thing to hit was this point. So these are my shorthand. These are my shorthand. So, and now we see here, this is really typical for part B. There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of issues here. So if you spent too much time, like if you discussed relevance really in depth 5 times above, you were not gonna get all of these points. And there were a lot of points here. And like this, people that ran out of time and didn't hit B are much more likely to get a 55. Are much more likely, because that's one of those things where if you don't address it, it's going to be problematic. Okie doke. So this one, what objections so then we look at the fact pattern. Didn't Carol, the store customer, exclaim at the time of the accident, "Oh no, a man just fell on the broken step"? Answer, so what? Question, is this the report that Dell's insurance company prepared following an investigation of the accident? So Dell's insurance company prepared following an investigation of the accident. And the answer, yes, that is the report the insurance company gave me. They always prepare a report in case we get sued. So with that, there's actually a lot of people I think missed this, and I'm curious to see the answers. I'm curious to see the answers. John, I'll address that. That's a really good question. What was my last thought? Okay, so it's prepared in anticipation of litigation, but I'm curious to see if anybody talked about this being attorney work product privilege consultant report. Lucy, that is not normal. That is not normal. Unless so Lucy said she didn't really answer the second call, like not at all, or just really, really shallow. I would say if you got another grader, they would have probably given you a lower score. Like that's really risky. Yeah, so Lucy, that's why, is because you hit the main things. So in issue B, you hit the main things in issue B. So the main things in issue B would be hearsay and the business record exception. Those were the main 2 big things you had to address in B. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Jagmeet, good. So here I addressed relevance, but I might have omitted that, particularly if I was running out of time. Policy exclusion. This is insurance, right? So there are reasons you can't use it. It's not being offered to prove liability, but it's rather being offered to prove something else. So I would argue what it is, what is it being offered to prove? It's just being offered for the report, so not to prove anything. Hearsay, it's a report made by the insurance company out of court, asserts the steps on the stairs are in very poor condition. Interesting too, is it actually says that the stairs are in very poor condition, not that they're broken. So I thought that distinction in the description also could be important, and I would probably talk about an ambiguity there. Yeah, that'll happen too. Yeah, so I'll talk, these are some really good comments in here that I'll address that people are making. So hearsay, it is hearsay, but it probably falls into the business record exception, although not all of the elements, you don't have facts for all of them. So it had to be made in the regular course of business. Here it was prepared after an investigation, and they always prepare a report in case the company gets sued. It must be made at or near the time of event. So the timing is a little unclear, but it was made before the stairs were repaired, and they were repaired the day after. So it was made at or near the time of the event. Custodian or other qualified witness testifies to its identity and the mode of its preparation. Mark can testify as to the identity of the report and the mode of prep, but it might be better to call somebody who made the report. But because it's always made and Mark is the manager, can probably have him testify. Sources of information and method and time of preparation were such as to indicate trustworthiness. Prepared by Dee's insurance company, which, like, if I'm cynical, then they might have a reason to lie or a basis to lie. But insurance companies do owe fiduciary obligations, which may surprise some of you if you've ever dealt with them. But they have fiduciary duties, and they need to be honest. So I think there's like maybe an argument for a contradiction here, but probably not one that's going to win. I think that like insurance companies do generally prepare pretty good reports. And then I raised the attorney work product privilege consultant report. So because it's a report, because they said they always prepare a report in case we get sued, that's the clue, is like, oh, in case we get sued, that's in anticipation of litigation. So that made me think attorney work product and might be attorney work product privileged. But I haven't seen a lot of people addressing that in answers that I've seen. So a few good points in here, a few good points. So somebody I think got fairly lucky and got a high score on this without really addressing issue B, because you spotted the issues and you might have just done really, really well on the rest of it, but another grader might not have given that. And some other people commented that like they ran out of time, gave a cursory answer to part B, but did well on part A. They had decent detail, but because of their short response, got a 55. That is very typical. And they want Lucy's grader next time. Good, some people did address that. And then also, if you don't have strong analysis, this goes to the point. Like they don't just want to see your law knowledge. If you're running out of time, omit the rules and do the analysis, because your analysis will incorporate the rules. Don't do that a lot. It's really like if you're like 5 minutes left, I got to hit these issues, then I got to hit these issues, then you might omit some rules and just like do some conclusive analysis, but focus on the analysis. You can't just do rules. They don't care how much law you know, they care, can you apply it? And yeah, this is if the prosecutor uses the insurance report in the court, can the defense enter the report into evidence? Yeah, I'm not going to get into all like the details of like evidence law, but yeah, the holder of the privilege can waive it, but if they don't want to, if they don't want to. So who's introducing it? Paul's attorney is introducing it. And has so Paul's attorney is introducing it. So because of that, they they have it. So it's been disclosed, it's been waived. So it's probably not going to fly on a work product, and it's been waived. So, but I would still raise it and explain it. And yeah, Daniel, this is a very good point. It's also good, like you might get a nice grader. It's important to outline your whole answer and allocate your time. So you at least don't run out of time with no analysis. All right, any other questions on this essay? No?
Yeah, Maureen, I had a question. Yeah, the question was to answer about both attorneys raising objections. So, would you mention who was raising what objection?
No.
Okay.
No, because 3, 4, and 5 are by Paul's attorney, and 1 and 2 are by Dell's attorney.
So that's kind of a given.
It's a given. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, good question. All right, let's look at the second one, which I know threw a lot of people off because they were like, is this contracts? Is it torts? It doesn't really matter. Don't worry about what subject it necessarily is. If you have an issue checklist and you're not sure, just jot them both down and then run through them and look. All right. And this one again goes on 2 pages. So everybody take 5-ish. I'll do it till 10 after to read. All right, y'all ready? Let's do this one. So we always start with the call to question. So here it says, is Bright likely to prevail in its suit against SM? Discuss. And if Bright prevails, what remedies, if any, would likely be available? Anytime they mention a suit, I usually look directly above to see what the suit is, so I know the subject. So here there was a lot of confusion about whether this was torts or contracts, but here it says Bright then sued SM for breach of contract and warranty. So it tells me we're more in contracts. And even though this was a breach of warranty issue, which is part of products liability and torts, the warranties is really a contract issue. We just group it in. And so and this one did deal with the defective product, but they were really focused more on warranty, the warranty theory and straight up breach of contract. So, okay. So that being said, let's jump into this one. Let's just jump into this one. So here, Bright Earth Solutions, an agricultural services business that employed 10 people and had over 100 clients, purchased a new commercial tractor mower, not suitable for personal, family, or household purposes. That tells me he's really a merchant, and then he's dealing with other merchants. From Sturcutus, I did not know how to pronounce this. I read this 4 times earlier. So SM for $15,000. In concluding the sale, SM presented a 1-page contract. So it's a 1-page contract. So it's a simple contract that contains the following language. SM undertakes, affirms, and agrees that this mower is free of defects in material workmanship at the time of its delivery to the buyer. So they make express warranties here. If the mower or one of its component part fails within 1 year of delivery to the buyer because the mower or its component part was defective when installed. So it's defective when installed. So it's they're really limiting it here. I guess it's just saying as you got it. Oh yeah. Somebody asked me to zoom in. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make the font bigger on my Word doc. Getting a spinning wheel. Let me just make the font bigger. Then I can be not so zoomed in. Okay. Okay. All right, so SM undertakes, affirms, and agrees that this mower is free of defects in material and workmanship at the time of its delivery to the buyer. If the mower or one of its component part fails within 1 year of delivery to the buyer because the mower or its component part was defective when installed, SM shall repair or replace at its sole option. So it's really limiting the remedies here. Any such mower or component part at its own cost or expense. Other remedies are excluded. So there's some warranties in here and there's some limits on the remedies. The contract also stated in bold 12-point font, there are no warranties expressed or implied, and particularly there are no warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose made by SM in connection with the sale of this mower. So there's some disclaimers here. I think this threw a lot of people off. Because they're like, oh, I didn't practice disclaimers. So, you know, and I heard lots and lots of conversations about this one afterwards. So I was excited to see it. Well, excited is a strong word. Authorized representatives of Bright and SM signed the contract, and Bright took delivery of the mower. So he took delivery, so he accepted it, right? So there was a contract, and then there was acceptance of it, right? So it's UCC because it's a lawnmower, it's between merchants, but there's perfect tender, right? But there's an exception to that too. It looks like they signed the contract, so they're framing it as a contract. You did not need to do a big formation analysis here. You could, but I wouldn't have spent the majority of my time on that. This is really a breach and remedies question. A little note on that. Often contracts fact patterns are formation focused, breach focused. Sometimes they're a mix and they're both, but really look at it. If they say it's a valid contract, but they talk about, will somebody prevail in their suit, then it's really a breach. And you want to really go into the different ways to breach and how was there a breach and using all the facts. So they fall in categories. They're categorical. So, okay. So this wasn't a big formation question. But it's UCC merchants, there's a valid contract, because I often raise statute of frauds, even though you didn't really need to here. But this is really talking about breach, and then like on what theories is there a breach? So breach of warranty, but also just straight breach of contract, straight breach of contract too. All right, so next paragraph. Over the next 6 months, Bright experienced numerous problems with the mower. So this is in 6 months. So this is within the 1 year time frame. This is within the 1 year time frame. Bright experienced numerous problems, and then they start listing them. The bolt holding the mower blade in place broke 5 times under normal usage. So he's not doing anything crazy. So there's not some misuse and then foreseeable misuse analysis. It's just normal use. The steering system was faulty, causing unsightly and uneven lines in mowing jobs, which this sort of made me laugh because I'm like, well, I appreciate like a fresh mowed lawn. And I was like, oh, so it's all crooked. That would drive me like a little bit nutty, right? And I feel like you guys can appreciate that. I feel like whoever wrote this was like, oh, haha, being silly. The gas tank installation was defective, causing intermittent gas leaks. Several times the mower would not start due to various electrical faults. I was going to say stars. Several times the mower would not start due to various electrical faults, and Bright had to cancel planned jobs. As a result, Bright lost clients and $5,000 in profits. So there's a lot of breakdowns with this thing. There's tons of them. So I'm like, this thing is horrible, right? If there's a lemon law for lawnmowers, this thing is like the picture for it. It's terrible. So Bright took the mower to SM. Each time it malfunctioned. So each time he brings it to them and they fix it, and then another issue. This is also an expensive thing. 15 grand. Like, I don't know how much lawnmowers are these days, but like that seems like a lot for a lawnmower. SM affected repairs, and the mower would work for a while and then malfunction again. So it's like, this isn't really, any good. Sometimes a replacement part would fail. Other times a different part would fail. So not fun. The mower was returned to SM for repairs 12 times in the first 6 months after purchase. So a lot. So they're really saying like, this is a repeated issue. So it's just entirely defective. It seems like it's like, I wouldn't want to work with this thing ever again. It seems like a total waste. So at the beginning of the 7th month after purchase, so it's at the beginning of the 7th month, so he still has plenty of time. The mower steering wheel came off during a job. So then the steering wheel comes off, which you can imagine, like that's going to be pretty problematic and probably cause some damage. At that point, Bright communicated to SM that it wished to return the mower and be refunded the purchase price. SM refused, pointing to the clauses above in the original contract. Bright then sued SM for breach of contract and warranty. So is Bright likely to prevail in its suit against SM? Discuss. So first, like I already said, applicable law, UCC, lawnmower is a movable, tangible thing. Merchants, Bright's an agricultural services business. SM is a business that sells lawnmowers. Valid contract, really brief here. I would just say here, there was a valid contract. They all signed it, etc. Might raise statute of frauds really briefly because it says that they signed, but you don't need to mention it to pass. It's just something like a great answer would throw in there. Then I'm going to get to the breach of warranty, and I separate out implied warranties and express warranties. So I separate those out. So implied warranty for merchantability, it breaches because I didn't finish writing this answer, but it is a breach because it doesn't work for the purpose that you would expect it to. And fitness for a particular purpose, it's supposed to use it for him to mow his lawns, especially here because it tells us that it's a commercial tractor mower. It's not suitable for personal, family, or household. So it's supposed to be usable for commercial tractor mowing purposes. And that's what they're using it for. And it doesn't work. So then we got to get to the disclaimer of the implied warranties. So then I talk about the disclaimer of each. You might organize this by going implied warranties, merchantability, and then disclaimer of implied warranty, merchantability, and then implied warranty of fitness for a particular purpose, and then disclaimer. You could organize this a couple of different ways. It doesn't matter, but it does matter that you address both. Jennifer, is that zoomed in enough for everybody? Can you all read it okay? Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. I just realized I didn't ask. So for the disclaimer of warranty of merchantability, the disclaimer must mention merchantability and be conspicuously located in the contract. So here it's bold in all caps, stated there are no warranties expressed or implied, and I just restated the fact there. So it's probably an effective disclaimer. That's probably going to be considered an effective disclaimer. because it mentions merchantability. It's conspicuously located because it's in all caps and bold, and it's on a one-page contract. So it's not like it's some hidden thing on page 17 in like white ink, right? Like it's visible. And then the disclaimer of warranty of fitness for a particular purpose. Again, it has to be posted in a conspicuous place. So here it's bold in all caps. Again, I use the same facts, but it's an effective disclaimer because it's conspicuously located. If you were like struggling with this, and a lot of people I think kind of panicked at first, and then that takes up some time, you could also just discuss these together, the disclaimers of warranty of merchantability and fitness for a particular purpose, and you could collapse them together. Just make sure that you organize, keep your rules together, know the separate rules for each issue, and address the separate rules. So you could collapse them together instead of really breaking it all apart. It goes a little bit faster. But your heading has to mention both issues, and I prefer to break stuff apart. But again, that's just a timing thing. It's a timing thing. Then also the express warranty that here they said would be free of defects in material and workmanship. Free of defects in material and workmanship. So there is a breach because of all of the issues within the first 6 months. And then I listed all of the issues. So there's definitely a breach of the express warranty. And disclaimers of express warranties are, you basically can't disclaim them. So it's very difficult to disclaim here, especially considering all of the different issues, and that they expressly said free of defects in material and workmanship at the time of its delivery to the buyer. So I think that we could, but there is a 1 year, guarantee with it, and this is within that 1 year. So I'm going to use a lot of the facts here in my discussion of what the express warranty is for and how it breached, how many times, how each time he tried to adhere to the the remedies that were provided for in the express warranty and how they didn't work. So, but I'm going to say this is a breach of the express warranty and he can recover. Also breach of contract. Also breach of contract. So this is UCC, so there's perfect tender. Generally, the right to reject is cut off by acceptance. So he accepted here, or it accepted, right? I think it's really a guy, Brighter Solutions, or a person. So generally it's cut off by acceptance. So usually this would be cut off, but there is a right to revoke your acceptance. There is actually a right to revoke your acceptance. So if the defect substantially impairs the value of the goods to the buyer and the buyer reasonably believed the defect would be cured, so there's one way to get it, or the buyer accepted because it was difficult to discover the defect, or the buyer accepted the goods because the seller assured buyer that the good conformed to the contract. So you can use a few of these. So the defect definitely substantially impairs the value because it's break and is, what was I saying there? It breaks and is broken to even to the extent that Bright is actually losing business as a result. Bright reasonably believed it would be cured because he brought it to SM every time it malfunctioned. So he brings it to them repeatedly. Also, Bright couldn't have known it was defective at the time of delivery because it broke when it was in use. So at delivery, he's not like testing it out or anything. And also it has to be like in use, like doing a job. So it wasn't defective at the time of delivery. He wouldn't have a way to know that. So I actually think you could revoke the acceptance and it would be a breach of perfect tender, and then I'm going to talk about the remedies. So yes, there was a breach of contract. So then for breach of warranty, the remedy there is a difference between the product as warranted and as received. It paid $15,000. I don't think it's worth anything. So you can probably recover the $15,000. Also, you can talk about consequential damages. So lost clients, lost profits, and then also breach. So just recover your expectations. So you could, I don't think I mentioned expectation, but I would definitely address consequential damages because it talks about at the top, consequential damages, lost clients and lost profits. Talks about at the top that he had over 100 clients. So for all those clients, you talk about lost profits. He also lost $5,000 in profits. So lost clients and lost $5,000. Oh, and I mixed these two up here, my factual. Let me just swap it. And then you could also talk about expectation, etc., which I should add to this. And It's not a modification. So a lot of people address this as a modification, but this is in the contract. This is in the contract. Now you could, it just says here, it doesn't say that there was a modification. And I did say, I actually do think you could talk about unconscionability for this, for the disclaimer. I do think you could talk about that. And then I was like, okay, well, if it's unconscionable, then what's your remedy? Could you rescind it or something? So I think you could also take that theory. And I did see rescission in several of the high scoring answers that I've seen. So I think you could talk about that. Generally rescission, it's like mistake or misrepresentation or fraud, something like that. And I don't think there was any of that, but maybe you could say because of unconscionability. And there's nothing here to suggest that there was a misrepresentation or anything. But it's also like, because it's so contradictory, you could say that that makes it unconscionable, like what applies. So I think there's some arguments here. I definitely think it's argument here. Yeah, Jagmeet, yeah. So I get the unconscionability argument. All right. Any questions on this essay?
I also put that he could have gotten the new mower. I mean, it was up to their discretion, but
Yeah.
he could have gotten a new mower.
Yeah, I could also do that. But he wants a refund, so I'm addressing the refunds. Can he get what he wants? But yeah, I could also get a new mower. All right. Let's go on to question 3. So this one, I'm just going to talk about this one. I'm not going to give you all time to read it. Well, actually, let me give you all just a few minutes to read it. So take 4. All right, let's chat about this one. This one we'll go through pretty quickly. I'm not trying not to keep you all here all night. So with this one, look at the call of the question. How should the court allocate the value of the business between Hal and Wendy discuss? Answer according to California law. So I see H&W, I know we're in community property, and it's also just a business valuation. So I'm really thinking Prairie Van Camp. So I'm like, God, this is like a crazy Prairie Van Camp essay. And it is. Prior to her, so let's start walking through it. Prior to her 1990 marriage to Hal in California, Wendy helped operate an antiques and rare book business owned by her father. So she helps to operate it prior to the marriage. Prairie Van Camp is a calculation for business valuation. So it's valuable company or asset is what Van Camp means. And Pereira is, what is it? It's from like your performance, essentially. I forget how I remember it. Somebody probably knows in here. So prior to her marriage, she helped operate the business. So she has some value that she's put into it before she's married. That's separate property. So anytime you see community property, you start with the general presumption. So California's community property state, all blah, blah, that whole thing, which you all probably have memorized pretty well, but then like you might, value from the business for market forces. Yeah, Jennifer, that's good. Like, just so you know, like I always give this example when I talk about community property. Sometimes I didn't take community property in law school, and you know, some days I was so stoked because one day I wrote a killer community property essay. I was like, I hit every single issue, I used every single fact, I was killing it. 3 days later, I could not remember the general presumption. Like I literally couldn't remember California's community property state. That is the nature of the bar exam. Like that stuff happens. So like, I'm just like telling you all now, it happens to everybody. And when that happens, just remember that probably means you're like pretty exhausted. I think the next day I had a full-on meltdown. Like I walked into my professor's office just in tears, and she was like, Maureen, go home and go to sleep, which I did after a few more hours of studying. But yeah, so just FYI, when you hit that point, it's usually about 2 weeks to the day before the bar. It's usually July 1, and then in another 2 weeks. So I'm expecting that I'm going to get some panicked emails from people, and just like, I've had so many people cry. I usually keep boxes of tissues in my offices. Anyhow, all of that aside. So general presumption, whenever I have community property, I also at the beginning want to think, what is the marital economic community? What is that time? When is it community property? So I want to like narrow in the time frame just to clear it out in my head, and write that down. So I address that. During the marriage, Wendy continued to work with her father in operating the business. So now that's community labor. Over the years, Wendy and her father jointly operated the business. And in 1995, they signed an agreement whereby Wendy became the owner of a 1/2 interest in the business. We don't know how she became the owner. There's ambiguity there. So I'm going to address the value built prior to marriage is separate property. 1990 to 1995 value, her effort, I'm going to use Prairie Van Camp, do the analysis. Now the 1995 ownership of a 1/2 interest, it's ambiguous how she acquired it. Was it a gift from her father and thereby separate property? Or did she purchase it? And did she purchase it with community funds? None of these things are answered. So I'm going to lay some stuff out. Well, if it's this, then this result. If this, then this result. But I'm going to talk about her ownership of the 1/2 interest. But still, her working there is also going to have an impact. So you're going to have to do Prairie Van Camp there. And the business doubled in value from 1995 to 2000. So it doubled in value. So what was that a result of? There's ambiguity there. So this one, you really had to deal with the ambiguities. It was narrow in like the variety of issues, but there were still a lot of issues and there was a lot of ambiguity here. In late 1999, Wendy's father died, and by his will left his interest in the business to Wendy, including all of the business's real property and inventory. So all of that is through an inheritance. That's separate property. That's her separate property. So there's a couple of different periods there's community labor, and they both have ambiguities. So the 19 to 1995, and then 1995 to 1999. And then they don't separate till 2014. So from the 1999 to 2014, again, you have to do an analysis. Then you also have to do an analysis. So I actually need to write that on here. 1999 to 2014 separation. You have to do that analysis too. So again, you're doing, okay, a Pereira Van Camp analysis. Then on top of that, they separate early in 2014. They separate 7 years ago, and they've been married the whole time, right? Or they've been separated, right? And now they're getting a divorce. So if there's been any increase in value in the company, then you might have to do post-separation, pre-divorce. It doesn't tell you that, but if there had been, you would actually do a reverse Pereira, reverse Van Camp analysis. So in the lower scores, I have not people, what I have seen, although I've seen a lot of high scores, and you didn't have to hit all of these things to get a high score, but I wanted to lay out in this fact pattern, you had to hit several of them, like particularly when they were married, and when they were married until 1995, and then the 1995 until the divorce. Then also, what's the effect of the father's will? You had to address all of that, but really good answers addressed 2014 to present, and they addressed pre-marriage. They talked about the ambiguity in the acquisition of the business, of the ownership interest. So there's a lot to go through on this essay. There was really a lot to go through here. So really good answers. Like, I was like, all right, it's all the same issue, but there are variations, the analysis is different. The analysis is different for each. Any questions on this one? Okay, so Catalina, that's a really good question. Somebody said, any chance you get this subject? There's absolutely a chance you get community property, 100%. Like, that could happen. Could happen, not 100% that it will, but it absolutely could. They've done remedies 4 times in a row. They've done community property back to back. They've done Cal evidence back to back. So everything is on the table. Everything is on the table. If they test community property again, though, it's kind of, it's a lot less likely. It's a lot less likely that they're going to do the same issues within a subject, though. Generally, that shifts. So I wouldn't totally expect to see like a massive Pereira Van Camp analysis, but they might do it. They could do like, they could have an issue, but I wouldn't expect it to be this big. They could have a business valuation one though. Okay. And yeah, prep for property. I'm gonna actually mention that at the end. Prep for property too. Okay, next one. Let me give you all, I don't know, 5 minutes to read this one just in case. The link's been in the chat a few times, but I'll also post it again just in case. I'm definitely enjoying the comments on this one. Good job, Jackie. Jennifer, she is wild. Yeah, this is, I've been waiting for them to test these rules, actually. I've been expecting them. Yeah, Ryan, that's a big deal. It should help a lot, Ryan. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Like this is as bad as like the J-Lo with Ben Affleck and then Diddy dropping a picture of them the last few days, like all that drama. I feel like this is like lawyers. If any of y'all know what I'm talking about, that was amazing. Oh, good, Gary. Good. All right, let's chat about this one. All right. So what ethical violations, if any, has Linda committed with respect to her? All these things. She is just all over the place. And what ethical violations, if any, has Tom committed? So we've got two lawyers here. Answer according to California and ABA authorities. A couple little quick notes. This is obviously PR. It's required by law to be tested every bar exam. So people sometimes say it's practically a guarantee. It is. You will see it on the bar. Occasionally they'll do it in the PT and maybe not in an essay, but they pretty much always do it in an essay. So you will have PR tested. That being said, because everybody practices PR, it can tend to be a little tougher to get a high score, not because the exam is curved, there's no forced curve on anything, but scores tend to be better. So like if you get an essay that's really tough, like people straight up don't study Pereira Van Camp. They're just like, nah, not going to do it. Right. Which is a problem. So then because of that, where an essay focuses solely on Pereira Van Camp, essentially, you're going to see, like, if you know that, you know, you're going to do pretty well on it. People are like, God, I thought that community property essay was garbage. And then they're like, how did I get a 70 on it? But it's because everybody else panicked and there's a lot of low scores on that one. So there's that. But also, you know, given that you know that it's going to be there, everybody practices. So people are good at PR essays. So if you're like, I only got a 55 or a 60, but I hit a lot of stuff, it's in part because, that's in part because everybody practices it. So, okay. Joy, this is all being recorded and you can watch the full contract discussion and I do address those issues. It'll be posted in the next day or two. All right, so that's some stuff about PR. So Linda lawyer is just starting out in practice. As soon as they see that, I'm like, okay, duty of confidence. She arranges with Cairo, a chiropractor, to give Linda's name to his patients who have been in car accidents or falls. So there's an arrangement, a referral agreement. So I know there's some duties, there's some issues there with referrals and sharing of fees, probably. When Linda recovers money in contingent fee lawsuits for Cairo's patients, she gives Cairo a gift, which they have agreed will be 5% of Linda's fee. So it's not really a gift, right? It's not really a gift, it's a referral fee. If Linda recovers nothing, Cairo receives no gift. If Linda recovers nothing, Cairo receives no gift. So this is definitely like a quid pro quo. They also form a partnership in which Cairo's services are described as marketing. Maybe it is marketing, right? But then that also actually makes, I didn't write it on here, but it also can deal with the advertising duties, which I don't think a lot of people talked about, but they describe it as marketing. So could be that. And there are particular, requirements for that. So first, this PR fact patterns, generally like paragraph by paragraph, they're going to be issues. There's going to be issues. So like here, there's 4 paragraphs. There's A, B, C, and D plus another one. So this is going to be it's going to pretty much go, consecutively throughout, and they'll go to each issue. So here it says financial arrangement with Cairo. So fee splitting with non-attorneys. So I talk about fee splitting with non-attorneys and referral agreements. So general rule, you cannot share with a non-attorney unless there's a particular scenario that exists. California, an attorney can pay a referral fee to an attorney referral service. I often will say, I'll just say like, under ABA. So I capitalize my ABA in California just to make it obvious. And I'm talking about the distinctions between the two. Just to make that, very obvious. So Linda's a lawyer, Cairo's a chiropractor, non-attorney. When Linda recovers money, it's in a contingent fee suit. For Cairo's patients, she gives Cairo a gift, which is a 5% share. So she is sharing with a non-attorney. So that's generally going to be barred. Under California, if you have a referral fee, then it's okay if it's the usual charge of a qualified attorney service, but it's attorney referral service, but it's not here. And you also have to disclose it to the client. You have to disclose it to the client, and it doesn't look like they are here. So this fee splitting is going to be a violation. Violation of duty of fee splitting rules. I also call it like the duty of financial responsibility as like a large umbrella, but you can kind of call it anything. Gifts. An attorney may not solicit a substantial gift from a client. That's not what's happening here, but they call it a gift. So I want to address something as a gift. An attorney can't give anything of substantial value. Giving 5% of a recovery is something of substantial value. And you can't do that. It can be like a token appreciation, but you can't do a large gift. So L frames a 5% payment as a gift, but it's not a gift under the rules because it's likely not an insubstantial amount. Cairo's not a client, but even if they tried to construe it this way, it's a violation because it's likely, again, a substantial amount. So here talking about fee splitting with non-attorneys, referral agreements in particular, and also gifts. You didn't necessarily have to talk about the gifts because it's really like raising and dismissing it doesn't qualify, but I think a better answer would. Partnership with Cairo, again, a partnership with a non-lawyer. Partnership with a non-lawyer. Let's see. Yeah, they also, okay, yeah, this is in this paragraph. So under ABA and California rules, an attorney cannot form a partnership with a non-attorney if any activities consist of the practice of law. Linda's obviously litigating because she's providing legal services by representing patients who have been in car accidents or in falls. So this is like directly in violation of the rules against a partnership with a non-lawyer. Partnership with a non-lawyer, which I think is a duty of loyalty issue. It's a conflict. Then we get to them. Then we keep going. So Pete is one of Cairo's chiropractic partners. Cairo sends Pete to Linda because Pete is seeking a divorce from his wife Alice. So we have family law being introduced, and I expect some issues regarding the fees, which we will see, or contingency. But also, then we find out that Linda is in fact wild, as Jennifer said. At least for a lawyer. There are some crazy lawyers out there. Duty of confidence. So first thing I talk about is, because now we're talking about a specific representation. I know that Linda lawyer is just starting out in practice. So because of that, I wonder if she's adhering to her duty of confidence. So I address that at the top also because I'll explain why, but because of a later issue, because of the duty of loyalty issue. So it says here, Pete tells Linda he can never forgive Alice because she was unfaithful. Pete tells Linda that he's having money problems and asks that she take the case on a contingency basis. Linda tells him she'll consider it if he'll have drinks with her. So the representation hasn't started yet, but she's coercing him. But also Pete is one of Cairo's chiropractic partners. So he's a pretty sophisticated individual, like, doctorate degree, etc. But he's seeking a divorce from his wife, and he can't forgive his wife because she was unfaithful. So he's in like a bad situation. So I think that there's some duress here. I think there's probably some duress here, which you didn't really have to talk about, but it's like some more stuff you could talk about if you address all the low-hanging fruit first. Pete feels he has little choice. So there is again duress, and goes out with her. Linda initiates a sexual relationship with Pete and agrees to take the case. So here it's a little ambiguous when the sexual relationship started. Did it start before the representation or did it start after? Because she agrees to it after they initiate the sexual relationship. So there's some ambiguity there, but I think it likely would be construed as having started before. Oh, Lavinia, maybe you can explain that. That's really interesting. So I think there's ambiguity in terms of like defining when it started. Like, is there a violation? But she consulted with him, and that's the issue. So, and I would say that is why there is a violation, because she consulted with him prior to the starting of the relationship. So there were some duties that were triggered then. And that's true too. Yeah, people are making really good points here in the chat. Yeah. So conflict, so maybe potential, but it's really probably an actual conflict from the outset, but there's a violation. And even if it was just a potential conflict, you have to get informed consent in California. So there would be a violation of the California rules. Actual conflict, sexual relationship, also here significantly affecting representation, because L may be actually violating, or is at least close to violating, her duty of, oh, I didn't read that fact. So in this third paragraph, the last sentence, it says that Linda is increasingly distracted from Pete's case by her desire to spend time with him, sometimes filing papers hurriedly and narrowly avoiding deadlines. So there may be a competence issue there. And she's really distracted. That gives rise to an actual conflict, for sure, because it's affecting her, the representation. However, she's narrowly missing deadlines and she's filing things hurriedly, but she hasn't violated anything, right? She hasn't actually not filed something. She's made her deadlines, right? So I don't, that is ambiguous whether there's really a competence issue. However, the fact that she's, when she's doing things in a hurried manner, she's missing issues, then that's going to present some problems. So the competence issue, and somebody mentioned a really good point, that she's doing car accidents or falls, and now she's doing divorce. Additionally, so then you have to talk about the representation. Despite the conflict, no consent was obtained, so there's a violation. Yeah, so yeah, generally speaking, so also they point out accepting Pete's case on a contingency basis. Accepting it on a contingency basis, you can't do that, and you can't take divorce cases on contingency. So this is a divorce case on contingency, so that's a violation. It's a violation there. So Tom, Alice's divorce lawyer, calls Linda one day and says, I know you're having sex with Pete. Either you settle this case cheaply or I'll report you to the bar. Linda decides to beat Tom at his own game, and without telling him, calls the bar herself and reports his threat. They don't ask about Linda's threat. Which is interesting. But she actually, with respect to that, she didn't violate the rules under ABA, because she did actually report. She did. Yeah, John. Yeah, it does kind of lead to ineffective assistance to counsel. Ryan, we should chat about that. She has to report her wrongs only, right? So she reports him, but she didn't report hers. So what ethical violations, if any, has Tom committed? There's two. So under the California Business and Professions Code, an attorney can't threaten to bring disciplinary charges to obtain an unfair advantage in a civil dispute. So the threat itself is a violation of the Business and Professions Code. So there's that. So you can't threaten. That's a violation. The failure to report, you have to self-report. And I thought under ABA, you have to report another attorney. In California, there's not a reporting violation issue, actually. So failure to report, that's also a problem. Yeah. And then duty to the profession. This one, I don't think a lot of people got. Duty to the profession for violating the law. So here, because he made a threat, which is then a violation of a civil code, that also is another violation of a duty, because you're violating the law. And I think people miss that. So the big issues you had to address here to get a passing score. So to get at least to that 60, here you had to talk about I mean, they really laid them out for you. You needed to talk about the fee splitting with non-attorneys and the referral agreement, not necessarily framing it as a gift. I think that a better answer would. The partnership with the Cairo is, again, partnership with non-lawyers. I have to address that. Relationship with Pete, this is really a big issue. There's a duty of competence and a duty of loyalty issue. There's some ambiguities in here that you need to address. And, you know, I always break it apart: potential, actual, representation, despite. So it's always potential, actual, representation, despite the conflict. Then you had to talk about accepting the case on a contingency basis. And then in call 2, you had to talk about the threats and the failure to report. You had to talk about both of those. Yeah. But you didn't necessarily have to talk about the duty to the profession. So, and a lot of people are saying like, yeah, I hit these issues, right? I hit these issues, and you may have, but that goes to the organization, goes to the organization where you've got to lay these out quickly and you've got to break things apart. And it also really goes to your depth of analysis. Here, like, you've got to use every fact. And like, one thing I want to point out, just reference back to some of the other essays, is using every fact. So Linda Lawyer is just starting out in practice. That goes to competence. She arranges with Cairo, a chiropractor, to give Linda's name to his patients who have been in car accidents or falls. So this is all referral. When Linda recovers money in contingent fee lawsuits for Cairo's patients, she gives Cairo a gift. So like, if you didn't address the whole gifts issue, then like, that's why I addressed gifts. But if partly because otherwise I didn't use the fact that she called it a gift. So if you didn't use this fact, if you didn't address gifts, you probably didn't really use this fact. You might have stated it, but you didn't explain the legal significance of it, which they have agreed would be 5% of Linda's fee. The fact that it's 5%, right? The fact that it's 5% means it's a set amount, it's a set referral. So it's not just some insubstantial gift. Also, the fact that it's 5% means that it's probably not insubstantial. The fact that if she recovers nothing, receives no gift. Did you use these facts? So go through your essays and say, okay, like, I take a highlighter. Like, all of you should take, like, tomorrow, you should go through your essays and like highlight, did I use this fact? Not just did I state it, but did I use it in its, like, for the reason they put it there, right? For like, did I use it in making an argument specific to that fact? And if you didn't do that, if you did it some, you know, you can get a 65 or 60, maybe 65. To go, you know, to get a 65, you've got to use all the facts. You've got to organize it well. You've got to address the counter arguments, etc. So, yeah. Okay. And also in some of the other essays, like, what, you know, in this community property essay, it was when I was going back to check that I used the facts that I saw all the breaks in the different discussions of the business. It's when I went back to check my facts. That's how I saw to split it up. That's part of time management. You check that before you start writing, right? And I cover all this in my essay course, but you check that before you start writing. You know, in this one, there are so many facts here. So Brighter Solutions, it's an agricultural services business. Did you use the fact that it's an agricultural services business? I didn't use the fact that it employed 10 people. Like, I didn't, like, I actually, like, I still, I'm like, how would I use, like, what is the significance of that? So that to me is unhighlighted. Lavinia, I mentioned that in the very last section. Yeah, duty to the profession in public. I just said duty to report, but yes, I did mention that in PR. The fact that they have over 100 clients, I use that to say, like, okay, you have a lot of clients and you're losing clients. Purchased the fact that it's a commercial tractor mower, right? What is significant about the fact that it's a commercial tractor mower? All of these descriptions are important. So it's really, and it's the use of the fact. So if you're confused as to, like, why did I get a 60, you know, not a 65 when I talk about these issues, it's probably your fact use. So you have to really look at that. You have to look at that. Oh yeah, you could use it to show that they're a merchant. Somebody messaged me. All of these ones we did pretty well, use all the facts, but this thing is long. I mean, these are just my little short outlines for every essay, and each one is like 3 pages with spacing and all of that. Okay, so let's look at the essay 5, good old property that nobody thought was coming. Runners and cappers under the first question. That's interesting, Starla. That's such good language. Like, good terminology. Yeah, you could talk about that. Like, yeah, I'd give to explain that to me though a little bit, honestly. Okay, let's talk about question 5, property, which I'm going to read it to y'all because this one is really 3 issues. It's really 3 issues. This one, so question 5, property. The call to question says, Ed objected to, well, it says really, what rights and interests? The fact that they say what interests, that's telling me property. But what rights and interests do Ed and Fran each have in the lane? So it's telling a particular property. The fact that it's a lane too is like, makes me think it's not like a whole parcel. Makes me think that it's more of an easement. And may Fran, over Ed's objection, carry out her plans for the lane, discuss. Yeah. And what rights and interests do Ed and Henry each have in the garden property? And may Henry, over Ed's objection, carry out his plans for that property. So then let's look at it. Then, oh, I scrolled to the wrong thing. And everybody, like, people did not expect property because in October there was a brutal property essay, lots and lots of facts. Organization was huge in that one. And then people were floored when they saw property here. So like I said, expect anything. You could get property in July. Like, I know you don't want it, but you could get it. Although I think like with everything they've just done, I think if you got property, you're more likely to get like a landlord tenant issue, maybe a mortgages issue. I was talking with somebody about this last night, but you know, who knows? So, all right. So Ed owned a parcel of land. Con laws do, but like they also were going to do it. We didn't think con law was coming, and then they did it like 3 times in a row a few years ago. So they did it a lot recently, and then they haven't. So yeah, I hate predictions. I hate them. But yeah. Jennifer. Yeah. So Ed owned a parcel of land on the north side of a rural highway. A lane connected the highway to the small country inn Ed operated on the land. So they're talking about property. I know I'm in property. The lane connected the highway to the small country inn Ed operated. So it makes me think that like it's connecting to a highway. Is there something by necessity? Is it the only road? But if there's nothing that says it's the only way. 10 years ago, Ed entered into a signed written agreement, so statute of frauds is satisfied, conveying a right-of-way easement over the lane to Fran, his neighbor north of his parcel. So it's a signed written agreement and it's an express easement. So whenever I see an easement, which is granting someone permission to do something, then I'm like, okay, easement. And then I'm going to talk, every time I talk about easement, I think about the creation of it, the type of it, the scope of it, and hasn't been terminated. Any type I think about an easement. Oh, and Jennifer, I'll mention that mnemonic for PR and after this. I always think, how was it created? What type is it? What's the scope of it? And has it been terminated? Has it been terminated? So I think of those 4 things. Okay. Fran operated a commercial farm with a small bunkhouse for farm workers on her land. Often when they tell you the reason that someone is like someone with an easement, if they tell you their use, it's because the use is going to change. And then what's the impact of the change? If it's a change in scope, what remedies, what interests, etc. Fran operated a commercial farm with a small bunkhouse. Yep. She often used Ed's lane to access the farm and bunkhouse from the highway. So she's using it as access from the highway. It's interesting that they say from the highway, but it doesn't say both. Recently, Fran announced that she was converting her farm into a 50-lot residential subdivision and the bunkhouse to a computer server center. So it's totally different. She informed Ed that she wanted to, so notice here too, she's turning it into a 50-lot residential subdivision, right? So increased traffic on the easement and the bunkhouse to a computer server center. There's 2 different uses happening here. So she informed Ed that she wanted to run new electric lines and a fiber optic cable along the lane. So I can expect, so now she wants to do this other thing. So you need to address the easement and then the use of these 2 different uses. Okay. So 15 years ago, Ed and Gloria, his then neighbor on the south side of the highway, had entered into a signed written agreement in which Gloria covenanted that she and her successors in interest would use her property only as a commercial organic garden, and in exchange, Ed would purchase products from Gloria for use in his country inn. Soon thereafter, Gloria sold her land to Henry. Ed continued to buy produce from Henry. So this, when you see the restrictions like this, that's generally an equitable servitude, real covenant, or restrictive covenant. And you have to address both. They don't usually tell you. You have to address both and then say which remedy they're likely seeking, because that's the big difference. So recently, Henry informed Ed that the more intense development Fran had planned for her parcel and the increased traffic along the highway justified the conversion of Henry's garden into a combination truck stop and diner. So, so Henry informed Ed that the more intense development, right? So now there's a change to this. Now there's a change to this. So we're gonna, you know, obviously I feel bad for Ed here. I feel bad for Ed here. Yeah, they probably added it as a question on, oh, that's actually a good call. All right. So what rights and interests do Ed and Henry each have in the garden property, and may Henry, over Ed's objection, carry out his plans for that property? Discuss. So we have to go through the remedies. The first one is an easement. You're going to talk about, so first thing, easement. I'm going to talk about Ed's right in the lane. Ed has a fee simple absolute. Like, that's simple. It's sort of silly, but we're going to talk about it. And actually, this should probably go above that. Okay, Fran's rights in the lane and easement. So I would talk about the creation. This is an express easement. The type of easement. This is an affirmative easement appurtenant. It's an affirmative easement appurtenant. So whenever you talk about the type, you talk about, is it affirmative or negative, and is it appurtenant or engross? So you always talk about those and establish that. Then you talk about the scope. Then you talk about the scope of it. Here, there is an issue with the scope because they're modifying the scope. But with easements, courts assume that the easement was intended to meet present and future needs due to foreseeable development of the dominant estate. So there's a question: was this foreseeable development? I don't know. It's like always, like everybody's turning their land into developments. So you have to talk about that. The remedy for exceeding the scope is to obtain an injunction or sue for damages. So injunction to stop it or sue for damages. An easement's generally not automatically terminated. So I'm answering the termination question in here. You can also break it out. So Fran has an easement, but Ed may sue for an injunction. So Fran's interest is she has an easement. It's not automatically terminated. She holds it, but for Ed rather, may sue for an injunction or sue for damages. And he may have cause to actually have it terminated if she doesn't comply, and if the injunction and damages aren't enough. Then the second part, Ed's rights in the garden parcel. So here we're going to address these as a restrictive covenant. Often when you see easements, like in an essay, there's often easement, real covenant, equitable servitude. You see them all together. So they often are tested together. So real covenant for the burden to run here. Always, like, if you have a hard time construing whether something is a burden or a benefit, just analyze it as a burden, because then you're analyzing more. And then if you make the mistake, who cares? People get these confused all the time. So don't worry about it too much. But talk about the different elements here. Talk about the various elements, that it's a writing, intent, touch and concern, privity. You know, go through the whole bit here. You know, the horse. Actually, I was gonna put that. So definitely address all of that. Notice, you talk about what type of notice they had. Equitable servitude, again, it's here, there's no privity requirement, so it's the same except there's no privity requirement, and that it's an equitable remedy. I usually also add a section on the equitable servitude versus real covenant, and I analyze what they're likely to get. He probably wants an equitable servitude. He probably just wants to stop it because he's got a good relationship, but he just wants to stop this from happening. Well, it's not going to be a good relationship anymore, but analyze what the party suing will want. Horizontal privity there is, but they do have a contract here. There was a covenant. And so it's like the contract is your horizontal, and then vertical is the assignment. But yeah, they do have it because they have the covenant here. And then H just has a fee simple absolute in the garden parcel. Like, I didn't know. Yeah, Amanda. Yep. I don't know why they actually asked. Like, I don't know. Maybe somebody knows this better than me. But I was like, why are they asking about H's right? H has a fee simple absolute. That's it. Because Henry. Yeah. All right. Lavinia, what's the congrats for? Did you do a good job? All right. How are y'all doing? Oh, for 65. Yes. Yeah, Mina, that is good. Yeah, Anna. Yeah, you could get a 65 even without. Yeah. Any questions on the essays so far? Just general stuff. Okay, so now I'm not going to go through the whole PT and like pull it all apart and teach because that'll take me like an hour and a half. But the basics of this PT, this was a memo. This was a memo that you had to do. So it was an objective memo. So you'd want to set it up as such. So you got the issue. So Marina, you got the issues, but it might be in your analysis, did you analyze it properly? So I would look at that because you can hit issues, but not hit all of the, little pieces of it and not be in depth. So we'll talk about that when we meet. So intro, explaining what you did here. I'm just going to tell you all how I set it up and what I analyzed and what I used the cases for. Okay, we can talk about that too. So I drafted the intro. The analysis looks like this. My headings would just be the two issues that were addressed in the two issues that were talked about in the task memo. Again, this is a long task memo. It goes on to the second page. Like you guys got hit with a lot of longer stuff. So here they wanted to know the impact of the law on the draft contract and without drafting new language, changes you might recommend to address our clients' concerns. So I broke this up into a section regarding the impact of law and the recommended changes on each of these. So A and then B, whether the draft contract between IBI and mentor creates contractual rights that an IBI mentee can assert against the mentor. So again, I talked about impact of law, recommended changes. For these, there was two cases in the library. The first case cited another case. So I used both of those for the rules and my rule proof for my case explanation. Here you had to do, this PT required a lot of distinguishing. So you had to do a lot of distinguishing in the first issue. And there was a counter argument regarding whether a confidential relationship actually existed. I've seen differing answers on this. I conclude that there was a confidential relationship, but you could go either way. I think really there was a confidential relationship though. And then in your recommended changes, in the client interview, there were concerns that were conflicting that were raised, and you really had to address your modifications of the contract to address these concerns and the impact of the law. That's where I've seen lower scores, is not incorporating these enough. But when you're skimming through the file, if you see a list like this, they're really they're bulleted and they're underlined and spaced, they're really trying to draw your attention to it. So you've got to that's why I like to skim the file after I read the task memo to see if there's anything big things that pop out. This would have popped out and I would have been thinking about this and incorporating it into my analysis. The second issue used the second case. Again, you had to distinguish and argue that it does give rise to a confidential relationship. And here, generally your client's going to get what they want. But here, even if the impact of the law, even if it has a negative impact on the draft contract, what we're going to recommend, and there will be ways for you to address your client's concerns to get what they want. So, and then the recommended changes go under the issue. So I did impact of law and recommended changes. So it goes in the analysis section, the analysis of each issue. And then I have my just canned conclusion that I wrote at the beginning. No, you can't, because you're not going to, it's going to be, you don't have an option of starting with the PT first, but I never switched the order. So you won't be able to do that this time because, yeah, you can't do that. And there's no borrowing of time. Okay. I'm going to pause for questions in a minute. But I want to show you guys, so a couple of things. Let me switch back to my PowerPoint. New share. If I could find it. There it is. Okay, so we're back here. So how to improve, right? So how to improve if you're not happy with your scores, which I'm assuming is why a lot of you are here. It's practice, obviously, but practice writing out full essays. Practice all the subjects because you could get property again, right? You could get Cal evidence again. Address all topics and all subjects. So I'm going to show you.